Hello again everyone, welcome back. The new season of PoE is just around the corner. However, if you are still struggling to find a build that you gravitate towards for your league starter, I have another recommendation for all of you. This time, we are talking about Blade Vortex, specifically a cold variant that uses the Occultist ascendancy to freeze your enemies and shatter them into pieces for your benefit. Cold Blade Vortex is a very strong endgame build that will allow you to push all the way through to the endgame. With a very easy playstyle that only requires you to use your main skill every few seconds, thanks to the use of Unleash, and a solid pseudo defensive that will freeze everything in sight thanks to your ascendancy, this build will serve you very well if you are looking for a solid endgame farmer. We make use of the pair of gloves Rim Sorrow for easy conversion, and I will also provide an alternative endgame setup that uses both Taste of Hate and Militant Fate that will provide you with a lot more damage. If you are looking for a solid spell build for Settlers of Kalguur, then this might just be the build for you. Hey everyone, very quickly just want to say, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content on PoE or on other ARPGs like Torchlight, Last Epoch, and sometimes even Diablo 4, consider subscribing to the channel and dropping a like on the video to let me know that you're enjoying the content and supporting the channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get into the build. Okay, so having a look here at our PoE, as you can see we have two trees to begin with, one for early game and one for a more endgame setup. They are both level 92, and on both of them I opted to take Oak as the bandit with the new reworked bandits for the 40 maximum life. Now, if we have a look here, you can see that this is a pretty standard evasion based witch setup. We start by taking these and patting all the way to the right. If you're starting the character, there's no reason why you wouldn't just take the early spell nodes here and pat through here and do the exact same thing. That's fine. I just opted to come always this way at the beginning, but you can easily take the spell nodes here for a much stronger start. And after that, it's simply a matter of pathing down here, grabbing life, grabbing all of this reservation, there's evasion here, and I would actually recommend you level with something else. I would recommend you can level potentially with Wintertide Brand, which has a similar enough setup, and there's a bunch of videos out there on how to level with Wintertide. And once you have a few more supports for this skill specifically, swap into it. I would not recommend playing Blade Vortex until at minimum you have Unleash, which if I remember correctly, you unlock at level 38 in Act 4. So until then I would never recommend playing Blade Vortex. It doesn't do enough damage, it is too clunky to play without Unleash, so I recommend leveling with something else like Wintertide Brand. But yes, very simple setup here. We mostly focus on evasion, we focus on crit, and we focus on cold damage up here, and a lot of power charges. For your ascendancy, as I said, you're an occultist. You first take Void Beacon into Frigid Wake, after that Forbidden Power, and lastly Unholy Authority for the extra curse. And you can check this whole PoE in the description of this video. So if we look at the skills, as I said, Blade Vortex, we link it firstly to Unleash, and Blade Vortex at quality 20 is actually very important because the quality of Blade Vortex will increase your hit rate of each blade. So the difference between 0 quality and 20 quality is very big. For reference here on this setup is about 100k, which for just basic quality on the gem I find very, very high. So try to get this up as soon as possible. And obviously it's a spell, so levels are also very, very good if you can get them. But yes, we have Blade Vortex linked to power charge on crit. This gives you generation but also more damage per power charge, and we're stacking a lot of those, so this is very good. We have Unleash for the comfort in playing the build, and then we have crit damage, crit strikes, and cold pen. Crit strikes can potentially, if you have very, very high crit on your gear, can actually be swapped out for something else, like inspiration or hypothermia. Both of them are pretty good. Inspiration will have the added benefit of just adding reduction to the cost of your skill, which is a nice extra quality of life, and hypothermia will have the benefit of you're more than likely using an evasion based chess piece, so it will probably be easier to get an extra green gem than a red one, but that should not be very difficult either. For our auras, there's two that are mandatory here, hatred and grace, I should say. And after that, you have a choice here. You either go Herald of Purity or you go, there it is. You either go Herald of Purity or Flesh and Stone. With a very specialized setup, you can get both in, and this is why this is here. I'll talk about that in the endgame setup. But you pick one or the other. Herald of Purity gives you about 10%, 13% of your DPS. And if we go here to Flesh and Stone, you'll see it gives you a very large amount of effective hit pool as well for enemies that are closer to you, because we always sit in Sense stance for the reduction to damage taken that the new Flesh and Stone provides. Other than that, we have two curses. We use Frostbite and Assassin's Mark. If we can only use one, I would say Frostbite is probably the easier one while leveling, because you're not going to get a very high amount of crit to begin with. So I would go with Frostbite first and eventually Assassin's Mark, and we'll link both of those to Arcanist Brand and also a Frostbomb to apply cold exposure. Here we have a defensive setup with automation, Steel Skin and more duration. Either Steel Skin or Molten Shell are fine, but I prefer Steel Skin because we have no armor, so Molten Shell is going to be very, very small, but I'll leave that up to you. Personally, I would recommend Steel Skin. After that, the next 4-link setup that I have here is Shield Charge with faster attacks, Defiance Banner. Banners are now free to use. There's no reason why you wouldn't use one if you have an empty slot. And this on its own is going to give you a lot of movement speed while planted. It also gives you a lot of spell suppression, but we're not reliant on that to cap our spell suppression. But while leveling, it can actually be very good, or while you're low on suppress, to just drop this when you're fighting a rare or a boss, and just put this down and suddenly you have a ton more suppress. Finally, our last 4-link will be Frostblink, linked to Bone Chill. This will make so Bone Chill actually gives us quite a bit of damage, because enemies that are inside the shield zones that Frostblink will put down will take a lot more cold damage. This is very good. And then we have an Enduring Cry with more duration. Enduring Cry now no longer provides any charges if you are using it with the automated system, the old Call to Arms. It's now required for you to manually cast, which absolutely blows, but it is what it is, so I have this to manually cast once I'm in a boss fight. And I don't have it ticked here, but if I did, it would be having a little bit more effective HP. So, on the items here, once again, we have two setups. We have the early game setup and an end game setup. On the early game, I have very, very simple items, there's not much to talk about here. Firstly, you want a Rim Sorrel, pair of gloves. This is how we are converting 100% of the physical damage to cold. And you kind of going to need that. Until you have that, like in the first day of the league, that should be very, very cheap to buy, but if you can't for whatever reason, you'll be able to convert with 40% here, and that's about it. Eventually, you'll be able to get a craft on your gloves from Betrayal, but until then, you need to just get a pair of these. And even with the Betrayal craft, you'd still need to get a very big implicit from Eater of Worlds on your gloves to convert 100%. So I find these to just be way simpler. Just socket these on, they're not even that bad. Just put these on and you'll be fine. Other things that are important here, I have an amulet with a +1. You should look to get the +1 because that's very, very good. And we anoint Overcharge at all times because a singular power charge gives you a lot of damage in this build. So look to anoint this at all times. Here we have a triple stat, good triple stat mind you, but still only a triple stat wand with crit, spell damage, and +1. Nothing too fancy. And the rest of the gear is just life, resistance, and suppress. Nothing here is that fancy. Just very, very basic gear that you can acquire on day one very easily for yourself. If we swap to the more in-game focused setup here, you'll see there's not much different. I just swapped a few points around. We added a timeless jewel here that will allow you to anoint this, or not anoint, but allocate this node. Inner Conviction, you gain a big amount of damage from just having this on. And if we just swap the passive trees, it doesn't look like a lot, but if we swap the gear, you'll see that you gain a substantial amount of damage with this setup. So here, Inner Conviction, very, very good. It gives you more spell damage per power charge. We get at a minimum of 7, and we can get some more with super optimized gear, but I'm not going to cover that too much because that's very, very high end, and you shouldn't worry too much about that in a beginner guide or a league start guide. As you can see, the passive tree is mostly the same, just power charges, crit, and life and evasion. Here we have a little bit of a change. If you get specifically on the helmet, I have here a helmet crafted with a deafening essence of loathing, which will give you that mana reservation efficiency of skills. And you don't need specifically this roll because you can also get it from, I believe it's Ether of World implicit on the helmet as well. You can get more reservation efficiency, so you might be able to use a lower essence tier here, but this one is a deafening, so the highest tier. You can then spend 4 points to get this mana reservation efficiency node, and you will be able to use both Herald of Purity and Flesh and Stone for a very, very big effective hit pool, well, a decent effective hit pool, and also being able to run your offensive aura up here. So that is very, very nice. But you will need that craft on your helmet, so keep that in mind. Other than that, the passive tree is pretty much the same. We still have nearly 100% spell suppression, and that is because I haven't put the highest on the gear here, but let's talk a little bit about gear, because this is where things change the most. We're still using Rim Sorrows, very good pair of gloves. Starting here, this is a 5 mod wand, but it's a 5 very good mod wand. We get double crit mod, +1, flat cold, and spell damage. It's not impossible, and I think if you're in trade, it's very attainable, but it's a very good one. On the shield, we have +1 life, spell damage. The spell damage is the least important of the offensive mods, I would say. And then we have crit and double resistance. The resistance mods here on all of the gear are high. You're not going to need that high, right? I have 70 maximum overcapped cold resistance. Just cap your resistances, just get as many as you need. And optimally, I like to cap chaos. I know some people don't care about that, but I think it's very important. And yeah, just cap your resistance and get as much as you need. And if you don't need that much, that's great. You can free those suffixes for something else. On the helmet, as I said, I have life, I have the mana reservation efficiency to allow us to use both auras, and then I have the suppress and the resistances. On the chest piece here, I have evasion, I have life, resistance, and the crafted mod that converts fizz damage taken as fire and lightning. This is something that you'll get from Betrayal, and it's very, very good to convert a portion of your fizz damage, which is, as you can see on the effective hit pool, is the lowest of the hits we can take. So that is very nice. On the boots, once again, very simple piece. It's a good piece, but it's very simple. Just evasion, life, movement speed, suppress, and resistances. On the amulet here, this is a very nice amulet. We have overcharge still. On the amulet, if you don't need the resistances here, you can actually get, if we go to our amulet, you can see here that you can actually get global crit, strike chance as well, which is very, very good for our build, and you can potentially also get cold damage, which should also be very, very good. So if you don't need any of the resistances, you can swap it for something else offensive. But here we have crit multi, life, double resist, and +1 level. On the rings, I opted to put 2 different rings. Both of them are essentially the best bases, in my opinion, that you can get if you don't need the resistance base of the rings. So the 2 tones, or the sapphire, topaz, and ruby. Opal ring, obviously an offensive focused ring, gives you elemental damage, which is very nice for us. And on the rings, there's not much that you need. Both of these rings are actually 5-stat rings, if I remember correctly. Yep. Because on the prefixes, there's not actually much that you care about. You care about life and evasion, but even evasion is a pretty small roll, so you can skip that easily. Rings will be very easy to craft, and then you just want resistances and potentially cold damage if you can get it, and whatever stats you need. And that's it. As you can see, I would need a little bit more strength in my gear here to be able to use the gems I have on, so I would need to look into getting some mods with that. Here, the second ring that I put on is a vermilion. Again, very good. Maximum life is quite nice, and as the exact same mods as the other ring. So just stats, cold damage, life, resistance, and evasion. On the belt, I opted to go with Stygian Vise. I think that is probably the best base you can get. And it's just resistance, maximum life, and flask supply you have 8% increased effect. That is quite good for both our Jade and Taste of Hate, which we'll talk about in a second. So the extra flask mod is quite nice if you can get, but treat that as kind of a bonus more than anything else. Finally, we have our Abyss Jewel here. Just get whatever good mods you can get here. These are just an example. And then finally, our flasks here. The only worth noting is our Taste of Hate, which has been changed, mind you. It no longer converts Fizz into cold damage taken, but rather converts fire and lightning from hits into cold damage, and also gives you +5 cold resistance. Important to note, it still will give you the 15 physical damage as extra cold damage, which is a very, very big amount of damage that you are gaining while having this flask on. So it's still worth for our build to try and get this. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If we look at configs, nothing here is stick to make this look insane, okay? Just, I went in a very conservative way of looking at this, in my opinion. I have chose to help Oak. I don't have any gods on to, you know, prop up my defenses. Yeah, all the things here are pretty above board, I would say. The enemy is chilled. The enemy is going to always be chilled against you. There's no questions about that. And just having power charge and being on sand stance. And obviously this is measuring against Guardian Pinnacle Boss. And yeah, guys, that's pretty much it. I think this build is going to be very solid as a league starter. I love Occultist. I think it's a very, very fun ascendancy to play. And I think this will treat you very well if you are looking to start with a spell that you potentially haven't played before or played very long ago, and you enjoyed Blade Vortex and you want to have another look at it. I think Cold Blade Vortex Occultist will treat you very well. It's a very fun build to play. You just vacuum through the map, essentially just blending everything around you with Blade Vortex, spinning around. So I think it's a very fun playstyle, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you all later. Bye bye.